Hi guys, I'm going to make you a video showing you how to use the quadratic formula. So up to this point we've learned a few different methods for solving quadratic equations. We have learned factoring, factor by grouping, difference of squares, and complete the square. Complete the square works every single time, but there are a lot of steps. So somebody back in the day said, every single time I solve this by completing the square, I do the same exact steps. Can't I just make a formula out of it? And someone did. So the quadratic formula is something you want to have memorized, and it's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. If you want a fun way to memorize it, you can always sing this in your head.
The square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay,
So that's just one way that I remember it. So let's practice this. I'm just going to make a quadratic formula or quadratic equation up, so let's hope it's pretty. Let's say we have 2x squared plus, let's do 3x minus 1. So if you look at it and you don't immediately know how to factor it, you can use the quadratic formula. Using the quadratic formula, you first want to identify what is a, what is b, and what is c. So our a value is always the coefficient in front of x squared. So that is 2. Our b value is always the coefficient that's in front of x. And our c value is always the constant, which doesn't have an a or an x. So there we go. Now we're ready just to take these and plug them in to the quadratic formula. So we have x equals, well, negative b. b is 3, so we say negative 3. Plus or minus the square root b squared. So 3 squared is 9 minus 4 times a, which is 2, and times c, which is negative 1, all over 2 times a. So 2 times a would be 2 times 2, which is 4. Your next step is to simplify your discriminant. So here's the discriminant, and we want to simplify that. And I'll write that over off to the side. Simplify the discriminant first. The discriminant actually tells you a lot about this answer. So let's simplify it. So I'm going to have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of, and we could do this one in our head, but I'll just plug it into my calculator. 9 minus 4 times 2 times negative 1, and I get 17, all over 4. So my discriminant is 17. Because it's a positive number, I know that I'm going to get a real solution. I actually can't simplify this anymore because the square root of 17, well, that's a prime number. And so this is our final answer. X equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 17 all over 4. Hope that helps. Okay, so let's do another example of the quadratic formula. Remember, you want to have the quadratic formula memorized. It's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Again, you can sing the song.
negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a.
Okay, so the very first thing you want to do is identify what a, b, and c are. If there's not a coefficient in front of x squared, we say that it's a 1, and 1's kind of like a ninja. You can't see him. So this coefficient would be 1. In front of the x term, again, we don't actually see anything, and so it's like a ninja 1. But the negative goes along with it. And so here would be negative 1. And then our c, again, is the last one. And so c here is 4. Now that we've identified a, b, and c, we're ready to plug it into the formula. So negative b, well, b is already negative. So we're just going to switch the sign and it becomes a positive 1. Plus or minus the square root. Well, b squared, negative 1 squared is positive 1 minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Well, 2 times 1 is 2. Your next step is to simplify the discriminant. Here's our discriminant. So we have 1 plus or minus the square root of, well, 4 times 1 times 4 is 16. 1 minus 16 is negative 15. All over 2. Now we need to keep simplifying. Well, crap. I have a negative inside of my square root. I don't know how to take the square root of a negative number. Yes, I do. The square root of a negative number just has an I. So this is like 1 plus or minus the square root of 15 times the square root of negative 1 all over 2. But we know that this equals I. Now remember, your I is bold, equals I. So I could simplify this to 1 plus or minus the square root of 15I all over 2. I can't simplify that anymore, so there are my solutions.